class, we're going to talk about how to research career options and think about how you fit in organizations, which are the context in which our careers can flourish, because we need companies and we need organizations to be able to do the work we want to do. So the agenda for this class looks like the following. First, we talk about our approach, how we think about it, some of the key terms and frameworks that we're using. Activities within an organization. So how does work get organized? Types of organization, because that context is really going to change how that work gets deployed. And then functions and industries, because those are going to be the groupings of either activities or categories of service, which again will affect the kind of work that we do and will align to our values and interests and things we want to be doing. And then how do we find our fit? How do we merge those things about us with the place we want to go? Because really the intention here is to identify your ideal fit within organization, function, and industry so it can really give you that fulfilling and exciting work. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into the class. So let's kick things off with Teal's approach to thinking about career exploration. Before we dive into our broader approach, let's think about where this class sits in the career exploration process, which is in those career options and fit. Because once we're clear on our values and our interests, then we want to think about how do those match with the context, the employer that we want to be at to keep driving our career. And then once we get past this, then we'll look at how we analyze those and then build the plan and go get them. A key term in this class is organization. We're intentionally not calling it company or business, because it's about this idea of a collective of individuals working towards a common goal. That goal might be to make money, it might be for a nonprofit or a cause, and it's important that we frame it that way so you can think about the context and the collective that you want to be a part of. So that's why we use the word organization, and that's how we define it. And what we're really after in this class is thinking about you, the organization, and the ideal fit. Because what we're not really talking about is sort of starting companies right now. You know, you're gonna want to think about how you shape the organization if you eventually pursue more entrepreneurial endeavors. But really what we're focused on is what is that context that we can be within that really excites us, energizes us, and moves us towards that fulfilling work. And so we're calling that ideal fit, the intersection of that Venn diagram. And the way we start to do that is we look at our skills, our abilities, our energizers, our potentials. The organization, they have functions in an industry, and where those intersect is at that function industry. We've got things we want to be doing, skills, crafts, disciplines, abilities. Those tend to align to a function. I want to do data analysis. There's probably a function called data analysis. Or that might be within the function of marketing, doing marketing operations. And then the industry might align with my values. If there are things that I care a lot about with the environment and impact, there may be industries that make that a little tricky. So what we want to do is find that ideal fit of the things that matter to us, the things that matter to the organization. Function and industry is really going to be where they come together and getting aligned with that work that really brings us that fulfilling work. So what we want to do is really focus on learning about organizations and functions and to help us explore our career options. Because again, companies are the kind of soil for our career. If the company is not rich with opportunity and we don't understand how it operates in the context in which it exists, it's going to hinder our ability to grow and to pursue the things that we want to do. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into the first section of the class. In this section, we're going to focus on the activities within an organization, and we're going to talk about it in this abstract way because that'll help us think about the kinds of things we want to do and what fills our day with tasks and work. And so we've got this framework that we call the 4Gs, and it's a way to bucket the activities within an organization. And we would argue that we generally have a bias towards one of these clusters of activities that excites us and that we want to be a part of. And so we wanted to put a language around that and kind of talk about how companies think about these clusterings of activities. And first, we'll look at goods. And we're using these words that are kind of generic because we'll talk about how they get instantiated in different organization types. So goods are the products or services that the company sells, right? It might be labor in the form of hours, if you think of like a law firm, or it may be a product. It might be a widget, a physical good, or it may be a digital service. But the goods part of the business is what's focusing on making the things that people buy. Then the next is growth, right? There is usually a part of the organization that is focused on taking those goods to market. And again, every company is a little bit different. So what we're trying to do is generalize these activities so you can think about what part of the organization you want to work on. So growth is going to be functions like, sales, marketing. It's those activities within an organization that help get the goods in the hands of customers and get them to transact. And the third is gears. Without the gears, the business won't run. But oftentimes companies are going to invest in that in a different way. So when we think about gears, think about that kind of plumbing and infrastructure for a company that it absolutely requires to operate. It's a focus on the business itself. And then there's a fourth one that kind of spans all of them, and it's general. And this is an important one to look at because if you're a person who really wants to touch all parts of the business, you have aspirations to be a CEO, general manager, that's where general falls. You're going to need to understand all three of them. And typically people will come up through one of the three main pillars and then get to that place of general. But you might very early on in your career say, look, I want to be a generalist. I kind of like being, thin and broad rather than deep and narrow. And so that's why we added this fourth one when we were first coming up with the framework of general, because there are, people that fall into that category that want to touch all three. And so between those four, now you've got an understanding of the kinds of activities that happen in an organization, kind of broadly, but I would say it covers the majority of the activities within an organization. Another thing to think about as you pursue companies and opportunities is the size of a company. Because the bigger the company, the more these categories of activities become discretized. The smaller the company, the more they blend and the more that people have to wear multiple hats. Someone may be doing marketing and product work. What it's important to recognize is that you are wearing those two hats. And the more that you can have clarity on those, the better you can understand those occupations and those functions and the expectations of them. And so as companies mature and scale, that specialization becomes more and more important and more granular. So that's the last part of the way that we think about these 4 Gs and the way that organizations operate. And as you think about the kind of work that you want to do, you can process, do I want to be doing many things and touching a lot? So that either puts me in the general or working at smaller companies where I can touch a lot of things. Or do I want deep knowledge and deep expertise in one of these categories of like making the products, taking them to market, selling them, or helping the business or even the department operate in a better way. And so that'll help you think about the goods, gears, growth, and general. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this section and move on to the next one. In this section, we're going to talk about types of organizations. In the previous section, we talked about the activities that happen in an organization. Now here, we're going to talk about a broad clustering of types of organizations to help us think about how those activities then get invested in. And one of the key drivers here is how a company makes its money. Right? Money at the end of the day is the lifeblood for a company. And so without money, it can't really operate in the commercial world that we exist in. And so looking at how a company derives its revenue and where its expenses go will help us think about how they invest in talent and how they value it, which will ultimately affect you. And so we put companies into these 3 meta buckets, whether product, service, or causes. Product companies rely on IP, which is intellectual property. They make a widget or a product, and what that typically means is that they have to make the product first, and then they can sell it. So that's going to require some level of investment. How they derived it, might be through venture capital, but they've got a product and it can extend beyond the hours in the day. And so examples of that might be like salesforce.com, Facebook sells advertising, Casper sells mattresses. They make a thing and they sell the thing. When we think about services, really what we're talking about here is labor, right? Not web services. Those are a product. They're extending data or a subscription. Really what we're using here, how we're using the word services, is we're thinking about labor, man hours. So if you think about firms like law firms or consulting businesses or architecture firms, they may package their services in a one-time fee or something like that. But at the end of the day, they're deriving their profit margins and how they make money by labor and the number of hours that go into things, because they can't really extend that beyond human-powered services. And then lastly, we would say causes. And causes make their money typically through donation. They may have a form of revenue, and have ways to monetize the company, but they're usually not profit driven. A lot of causes might be nonprofits or universities, and there's lots of really interesting models for new, benefit driven companies, but they may not be as profit driven. So we put them as a third category because the way that they invest in the talent might be different, and which would obviously affect the way that you would think about your values and your priorities as you go into one of these organizations. And so here's some examples that we want to look at. Take Google as an example. Their product might be Gmail. Their services, well, here we put Google Cloud Services, probably a little confusing with the language, but I wanted to show that they probably have a consulting business that really helps deploy those. And you see that a lot in enterprise models. And then they also have causes. They have google.org. So some companies really have all of them. And if we think about, examples like someone's primarily consulting, like Accenture, they also have product solutions that they've grown through acquisition. IBM is another very good example of a company that's, it's got all three of these. So when you're looking at companies, you want to see what part of the organization do you fall into, and then, do they really value in it? Is it where they make their primary revenue? Especially when a company has multiple, be mindful of what the primary source of revenue is, because that's going to shape how they invest in it, how they think about it. When the economy makes big changes, you'll see how they invest in those. So it's really important that you be mindful of these things to help you think about how organizations run and invest in talent. In this section, we're going to focus on functions and industries. Let's go ahead and define those terms because they may be a little bit abstract. So a function is a grouping of skills and expertise within an organization. Some companies might be functionally organized or regionally organized or product organized, but they will have an understanding of how abilities and skills cluster. And so we're going to talk through that, and that ultimately affects like where a job sits within an organization. And so knowing these functions and how companies think about them is really important. When we look at an org chart for a company, and this is a, kind of a schematic of a diagram for what an org chart can be. But when you think about the org, there's the top level executives, and then you're going to have like your CMO, CDO, CRO, CFO, COO. And that is really emblematic of a function. A CMO is a chief marketing officer. And so what that is showing is the company drawing boundaries around all activities having to do with marketing because they want an expert leading those activities. Now, some companies may distribute that regionally and make like a regional CMO, or they may have all the marketing people report into a region. And, that's getting into like dotted line and solid line relationships, which we're not really going to cover here. But when a company has functions, what they are saying is we are clustering activities. And the bigger the company, probably the more granular they get with a function. So let's talk through an example of that, right? If we look at the high level activities of growth, goods, and gears, there tends to be a mapping. It's not always 100%, but generally the functions fall into those buckets where growth is like sales and marketing, things that are revenue related. They help grow the business. goods, technology, product, consulting. Those are the things that they sell. And then the gears, operations, finance, HR, legal, the business needs them to run. And so that's pretty coarse. And the smaller the company, the more that a person might have a broad remit. But then the bigger the company, then you layer on resolution. So let's go down the growth path. If you go to marketing, then marketing might break up into acquisition marketing, content marketing, digital marketing, brand marketing, and different companies are going to organize this in different ways. It might be earned, it might be organic, it might be paid. They're going to have different ways of clustering it, but it's all really going up to marketing. And what we see, this tends to have a pretty high mapping to job titles. So if we go down one level, then we'll look at different kinds of content, let's say. That email marketing, video marketing, social media marketing, influencer marketing, event marketing, right? And that might go into a director of content. And as you see these levels, you'll see, and you look at opportunities, you'll see that they tend to map to seniority. Let's go one level down. This would be at a very big company, but they might have someone whose full-time job is to focus on Twitter. And, maybe they cluster a few of these. It's like someone gets Twitter and LinkedIn and Pinterest, and then someone else takes Facebook and Instagram. And so what you'll see is that the bigger the organization, the finer the resolution or the more granular functions might get. And when you think about this, it starts to present what career ascension and growth could look like for you if you're able to map out the organization and how they think of the nesting of functions. There is no standard for functions, which makes it kind of annoying. But if you look at job descriptions that are posted on a company, you might be able to start to discern how they think about their functions and how they organize the nesting of those functions. And so what that translates to is like the level within that function. Again, we're using the language of resolution. So that low resolution might be marketing, technology, human resources. One tip here is to look at C titles. That tends to be the lowest resolution of a function. If a company has created a C title, being a chief marketing, chief technology, at the corporate leadership level, well, that's telling you that's kind of like the apex of the org chart, and that is the coarsest way that they're thinking about it. Some companies, if it's an important category to them, they may, peel it off. So as an example, chief brand officer, chief communications officer, chief marketing officer, one could argue that those are all various forms of marketing. So I would look to see reporting structures and how the company does that. If a company has, a lot of communications priorities, they may make it its own C title. But understanding those things are really valuable because then they help you understand how you would grow within that company. Then you could look to see how do they ladder down. So within marketing is content marketing. What are the symbolic titles that tied to that? Are they directors? Are they VPs? How does the company think about it? And then what is one level down from that, which we would say high resolution. And what you see there is that those probably start to map directly to job descriptions. And so that's why we think these functions are really important. And even though the company may not be explicitly thinking about it as functions, it is more often than not implicitly there. So the more that you have that understanding of the organization and the way they think about it, the better you'll be able to plan out your career growth and which functions map to your skills. Because that's, again, what we said at the beginning is that what functions are is clusterings of skills and abilities. So if you've got these skills and that you're excited about, by identifying the function, that's going to show you where you can exercise those skills and build them. And so here you're starting to see those two worlds come together because certain functions are going to have more or less requirements of a particular skill. Now, it's not always one-to-one because these skills can recontextualize. So let's take research, for example. Within product design, you've got to have research abilities. But also in sales, you've got to research. And on more of the gears side, on administration, you've also got to be able to do research. And let's take a skill like negotiation, event marketing, procurement, employment law. All of those require the negotiation skill. So a skill doesn't always map one-to-one to an occupation. Many skills are actually extensible and can exist in different contexts. So then what you want to do is think about which of those functions allow you to pursue those skills and grow those skills. And the cool thing is that there's always expanding functions. This is not a fixed thing, and that's part of the reason that there's no standard for it. So what I'd look for is what are these up and coming C titles, right? You're getting Chief Diversity Inclusion, Chief Content Officer, Chief Data Officer, Chief Culture Officer. And some of these go away. Chief Sustainability Officer was very common for a little while. Now you're seeing a little bit less of it because companies just think that's the way they should operate, and maybe it doesn't warrant a C title. So looking at how companies frame their C titles, give them out, and keep them will tell you which functions are up and coming. Sometimes functions start to converge. There's a chief growth officer that's coming about, and people converging, or companies, I should say, converging product and marketing or sales and marketing under one organization. And so those might be some clues to show you how functions are evolving and what's a little more current. Industry is oftentimes a really tricky word because industries can change. There are standardized industries. The EU has one, and there's different organizations within the US that have them, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because they want to categorize industry. But now that's becoming more and more complicated. So we think about it as a way for you to group organizations kind of based on the markets that they serve. But really, it's a taxonomy that you can use for yourself to kind of align to your interests and the domains that you want to be a part of. And it's really important because companies value domain or industry knowledge, sometimes independent of occupation or functional knowledge. So let's talk about that a bit more. When we talk about an industry, we're talking about collective efforts to solve similar market needs. And so that is an ability to have domain knowledge on what that market is required to do. And hopefully that domain is one that's of interest to you. It aligns with your values and the kind of work that you want to be doing, somewhat independent of the occupation, craft, and function. So some examples of industries: transportation, technology, healthcare, hospitality, entertainment, real estate. The tricky thing is that they are not so obvious, right? Let's take a company like Uber. Is it transportation or is it technology? A company like Amazon, is it retail or is it technology? And really what we would say is they're more like tags than exact categories, and use them as a way to organize organizations for yourself to target these domains that you're excited about. And when companies get big enough, industry is really not that helpful because they could be operating in many, many industries. So be mindful of industries that you've got experience in, and if you could leverage it, or experience that you want to be a part of, and seeing if there's parts of organization that engage in those industries. You also want to be mindful of how industries are affected by current events. So looking at what COVID's done, right? Obviously the retail industry, and it's really the physical retail industry, was clearly affected. Travel as an industry, you might call that hospitality, but all of those things are affected. So what I would say with industries is that they have a really important part to play in like the economic viability in the moment. And that is the kinds of thing that's changing all the time, because some industries may come and go given new technological advances or changes in market dynamics. So that's where industry is also really important to help you think about your career growth and where those opportunities are going to be presented given the broader global dynamics. Some industries that are really thriving and seeing a big boost from the world we're living in now are things like collaboration technology, right? Working from home and remote meetings. Those probably wouldn't have grown at the rate that they are had the world not sort of experienced what it's experiencing. So another good example is home fitness, delivery, last mile logistics, e-commerce. And so as you think about your career growth, it is good to approach this kind of like an investor and think about what industries are going to thrive, because those are going to be the companies that are opening up roles. They're going to be hiring more aggressively. They're going to need to fill a lot of seats, and they'll probably have a higher appetite for bringing on people with an excitement and energy about their industry. And so bringing it all together is skill, function, and industry. And these are the things you want to think about as you explore these new career opportunities, because the skill might be building relationship. Well, that's a pretty good match for the sales function, but then the industry that you do that in would be very different. So you might be a person who's done sales and good at building relationships, but you're coming from the media industry and selling advertisement, and now you want to go into pharmaceuticals because you maybe moved to a geography where that's a flourishing market. And so all these things come together and they really affect your ability to get hired and do that work, because companies want to hire you for what you did, not what you want to do. So the more you can frame your value to the market in this way and being mindful of the value you bring, the easier it's going to be to get hired and do these and pursue these things that excite you and fulfill you and are that work that you're excited about doing. So here's some examples, right? Let's take the function social media. Here's 3 very different ways that it could come to be. If you are in the transportation industry working at a company like Lyft, you might call that technology, but you're going to need to be able to engage in topics of transportation and understand that that's the market you sit within. Maybe it's hospitality, right? Understanding hotels and what's going on with that market, or it could be a nonprofit. Right? And so here what you're seeing is a product business, maybe more of a service business, and a cause business. And so here you see a couple other functions and a couple other ways that they could come to be. And so that's why we think the intersection of function, industry, and organization is how you really think about that context in which you can deploy your skills, abilities, and values and get that work that really excites you. In this section, we want to bring the class all together and thinking about how you fit with the organization. So first thing we want to look at is, are you a generalist or are you a specialist? And do you want to be a generalist or do you want to be a specialist? Both have value. Specialists might have a bit of an easier time communicating their value because a lot of times companies want a very specific thing. But that's not to, that's not to discount or devalue generalists. There's a lot of opportunities for generalists, and there's a lot of research that shows being a generalist can add a ton of value for the organization and can be a very enriching and fulfilling career. So having an opinion on that is really important for you as you think about the kind of work that you want to do. Then you want to think about the level of seniority you want. A lot of people think that they need to manage and they need to lead to make more money, and that's not always true. What's really important is that the work that you do is fulfilling, exciting, and you can be really good at it. And then you can prioritize the values like income or balance or the things that matter. So thinking about whether you're an individual contributor, which means you're really rolling up your sleeves, you're doing the work, it's going to be quite granular and technical. You're doing that, and technical, what I mean is more technique than technology. So you are doing the sales, you are doing the marketing, you are doing the coding. Then we go to manager, which means you're starting to manage people. And you're starting to spend the bulk of your time on helping people be productive and helping the company get the most value from those people, which means their growth and them having fulfilling work so that everybody benefits. And then last is strategic leader, which I would say is like a manager of managers. So now you are managing people that are managing people, helping set the objectives, the vision for the company, probably starting to have more of a broad remit around profit and loss and budget and things like that. And sure, there is usually a sort of mapping to career growth within a company with the more you move up, but we want to make sure that we emphasize that that's not always the case. And if you pursue, management and leadership because you think it results in growth, but you don't have a genuine interest in doing it, that can lead to less fulfillment, drained, and unhappiness with work. And there's absolutely a case to be made for depth and really going deep in your craft with seniority. And a lot of companies have done some very cool things to make that possible. So that's something you want to look out for. They don't always have to go, up into management to be able to grow your career. And so here's some examples of how that context might change. Let's take the craft or the discipline or function of recruiting. You could recruit in-house, so that means you're in the gears part of the organization, or you could recruit at a search firm or a headhunting firm or recruiting firm. The difference here is when you're recruiting in-house, you're a cost center. You're in the gears. When you're in a recruiting firm, you are the goods. You're the labor that makes money. And so the company is going to invest in that in a different way, but it's also going to require different skills of you. Again, using that same example, when you're at a search firm, you're probably responsible for going out and getting clients. Where if you're in the gears, you don't need to do that. You really just need to, I shouldn't say but the focus of your role is on attracting talent to come work at this company you're really excited about. Where when you're doing it as a search firm, you got to go first get companies to be excited to hire you. So you got to do sales, and then you got to go get them talent. And so the context is going to have a big impact on the skills required to succeed in a role. And so that's something we want to think about, how that company makes their money, what's that function, and then how those come together are going to affect the requirements on you to be able to do that role. If you want to start to explore functions and see what's possible, we highly recommend you go to the functional channels within Slack. There's a lot of people there really excited to talk about their function, grant informational interviews, in career commons. The functional channels are there. You just search for them. And then in Career Council, we also have the functional channels where you can have more long-form discussion, and people are more than happy to do informational interviews. As you're exploring possibilities, what you really want to do is understand those industries and the occupations. And so you want to look at what are the issues that companies are solving? What are the issues you're excited about? What's the work environment like? What's the work setting? Does it align with your values? What are the skills required? What are the responsibilities? And what's the outlook? That really starts to tie to that market. And where is that market going? What are going to be the demands on those occupations? As an example, a lot of digital marketing is really growing now. That is the way that people acquire customers, e-commerce and a lot of direct to consumer. So that's going to mean there's a lot of career growth and new opportunities in those categories. And sort of the inverse is going to happen. Certain categories are going to be not as required. So like physical retail right now is not as required. We'll see, how that bounces back, but that's where you having an outlook on where the market is going and kind of thinking like an investor for your career could really have a lot of value and help you think about what that fit is for you. Ways that you can research this, there's lots of really good tools. Obviously reading business publications. The U.S. government has things like Career One Stop, the Occupational Outlook, ONET, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there's this great site called Zippia, which I'll show you in a minute, that has a great career researching tool where you can look at functions, through education or through companies. Zippia has this great tool where you can look at occupations and then you can see what are industries that require it, what's kind of general income ranges, what are the things that you need to do, and also they'll show you what companies have open roles in that category at the moment. As you research companies, things you want to look at are the size of the company. That's going to, again, show how specific they're going to get on the the 4 Gs. Stage and age, that's going to affect how the company runs and their willingness to invest in new roles. Their mission and values, how do those align with you? Their product and services, do they make something that you're excited about and you think you can contribute to? Location, right now we're in a world where work from home and remote is very viable, but think about what that looks like for you. Do you want to be in an office? Do you want to be able to work from home? Do you want a hybrid situation? You want to be mindful of that because that's going to align with some of your balance values. And then the job itself, what kind of roles do companies have? What are they hiring for? Where do you see them expanding? All those things are going to help you think about places and that you can go work at and the kind of work that you could be doing. And places you can research companies, most of these are like investor platforms, Crunchbase, AngelList, CB Insights, Fortune. You can research companies, you can learn a lot about companies. And then there's more like these job type sites like LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Built-in, Idealist. And you can research companies and really learn about cool companies that are really doing cool things. And sometimes you're not even aware of all these really incredible companies that are out there that can enable you to do very cool things. They may not be a name brand you've ever heard of, but really cool opportunities doing really incredible things. So here's Crunchbase, which is a great site. You can research by funding. It's really mostly focused on startups and a lot of the venture capital environment. But a lot of these companies go IPO. They have very cool products. So it's a great way to research companies and see the kinds of things that you could look at, which then you can go explore job opportunities. Lastly, we're going to focus on learning from people. As you think about exploring career options and learning more about what a particular function entails, informational interviews become a very powerful tool. So as you look on LinkedIn and you research roles and titles, you can find people that have that title or role that you're excited about. And you want to be able to understand their career history, the functions that they've explored, the occupations they've had. And then eventually you're going to want to reach out to them and try to schedule that discussion so that you can learn and ask those questions. As you're exploring different career opportunities, you want to make sure that these are jobs you'd be excited about and the skills required are ones that you either have or are excited about gaining. And we've built a tool for you to start to track these and keep track of everything that we've covered in this class. Let's go ahead and open this career shifting research tool so I can walk you through how it works. The goal of this tool is to help you organize this process and starting to use some of the structure that we've presented. And here's a little example of, say you want to do operations or HR or finance. You would then say, where does that fall into one of the G's? Is it goods, gears, growth? And then you can start to map the industries that you're excited about and then start to research those companies and build out these potentials for yourself and things that you can explore, which would then lead to people that you might want to talk to. So we've got a tab for you to track your contacts and start to organize your informational interviews, the kinds of things that you'd want to learn. So here's an example, who the person you'd want to talk to, their name, the role, the function, the industry that they're in, and then taking some notes. We've also got a tab for you to build out your research. Here's an example as a product manager in the industry of entertainment, a little bit of the job requirement, income range, your excitement level for it, and then some of the things that align with you, your work styles, your value, and any notes. And then here you can start to prioritize those job titles that you're excited about. So as you're looking at job titles that you're exploring, on the various job sites, now these aren't necessarily jobs you're applying to. These are job titles that you're excited about. But using job postings is a great way to do that. And then lastly, we've got the plan, so you can start to give yourself some objectives for how you would grow into that role and what are the skills and knowledge that you need and the experience. So this little tool should help you plan the management of your skills and the companies that you'd be excited about as you think about your career shift and exploring these career opportunities. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this section. All right, so that does it for this class where we really wanted to expand the way that you think about occupations and the ways to go pursue the work that's exciting for you. And all these things really matter because it's not just about the craft or the discipline of, being a marketer, for example. Where you do that really matters. The organization, the company, and then the industry that they do it in. And it's really at the confluence of all those that's going to shape the kind of work that you do. So we wanted to expose that to you. We wanted to give you some new dimensions to think about as you think about companies, because too many times people just focus on the function and they don't think about the way it's going to instantiate. So that's why we really wanted to equip you with that information, and so you can think more broadly about the kind of work that would be exciting for you, but also show you new ways to go out and explore and discover the different possibilities. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap the class.